Road mic. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. All in, all in. Alright. Hello everybody. And welcome to Politics, Culture and Some Other Shit, the podcast. Well, I'm doing this as a live stream, as you know. Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Do the thing. Hope you're all well. Tonight I'm going to be talking about, as I said in the description of the episode, it was literally the only game in town. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, and how much of a disaster it is. But we'll get there. We'll get to it. Going to a couple of updates. Yeah, let's do that. So what did we do on Saturday past? Well, first of all, my buddy Will came over from Glasgow. He's one of my dear friends. We used to run around the world together when we were much younger and have lots of adventures. And as adults, we try to run around the world and have adventures. Will comes on the road with us in with the Bonnevilles whenever we get a chance to do that. If we ever get the chance to do that again, Will comes on the road with us and takes care of the merch. And if some of you have seen our gigs, you may have met Will doing the merch and running around after us at our shows. But he came over from Glasgow. The first time I've seen him in 2 years, and that was really difficult because as I said, he is one of my dear friends. I'm very lucky. I don't know about you, but I consider myself to be very lucky that I have sort of 4 or 5 people that I would consider very, very close, very dear friends, people that I would trust. We need trust, don't we? Because that's a big deal. And Will is definitely one of those. Just give me a little twist here. Give me a sec. Here's some rumble. Yeah, so see if the pop shield isn't centered on my mic. It annoys me so much. It's like a little thing that I have. Little OCD thing. So yeah, so there we go. Will came over and we went to Stendhal Festival. We played Stendhal. Bollocks, I should have put a photograph up. I wonder could I find it. Might be able to find it. Hold on. I don't know if I can be arsed. But yeah, Will came over just to hang out with us and get drunk. And we did that in fucking spades. So we went to oh, there it is. Let's see if I can get that up. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Let me see if I can pull that up on the screen. If you're listening to this, you're not going to be able to see that. But can you see that? Can you see that on the screen? How cool is that? So we played. I'll bring it bigger there. Yeah, so there we are. That's us. Down here, way at the bottom where the lighty lights are. But you can see we were down in the Woodland. It was this sort of valley. So you had the big main stage up in the main field area. And then you had a couple of different stages. If you've been to Stendhal, you know the setup. And we were in the Woodland. It's called the Woolly Woodland stage, I think it's called. And we played a couple of... We got a 45-minute set. And you can tell from the photograph there, it's very dramatic with those trees. And the trees are all lit up. And it looks fantastic. And that photograph looks good, but it looks as good as that in real life. It's absolutely gorgeous. I wonder, is there any more on the web? Oh, there's another one. You can sort of see it there. Not quite as spectacular, but you get the idea. And they've lit up the area. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Look at that, isn't that great? Somebody at our gig with their kid. Finally got the kids to their first Bonneville's gig last night at Stendhal. There we go. Oh, there's a video. You won't be able to hear that, but there's some video there. But yeah. But there we go. Wasn't that awesome? And it was packed. And it was fucking packed. She was rammed bass. And everyone was bouncing. The whole place was bouncing. And it was such a treat. It really was. I can beyond a treat. We forgot. You do forget. You can't blame us really for forgetting how good this feels. You know, and I noticed that I was reading there. I've noticed that a few people that are involved in the arts over lockdown, me included, were talking about quitting. And I was reading who was it? The comedian Aaron McCann, and I read a little post on his I think it was his Instagram. There was a photograph of him, and he must have played a gig in London. He's over in London at the minute, and he must have played a gig in London, and it was packed, and he was fucking buzzing, and he came out and he put up this post, and he says, I'm a bit drunk and I'm a bit emotional, and I'm not going to apologise, but I'm going to say this. I was thinking about quitting, and I'm glad I didn't. I know how he feels. I really do. Because you're clinging on to this abstract concept that is your career. And at this point, at the point of when we're in the middle of we're in the middle of this lockdown, it is abstract. You still have to write songs, and you still have to try to write songs. It's difficult to write songs when you get nothing to fucking write about. There's that as well. You know, the well of your experiences, it only goes so deep. There's only so much you can tap out of it. You need ongoing experiences to write about. I know I do. That's the way I work. So you're kind of sitting there, and then eventually, and you're looking at our political situation, and you're looking at the people that are in charge, and they do not fill one is not filled with confidence that we're going to get out of this, and that's putting it kindly. Joseph Toman, there's a couple of people. Tadashi Zinwa, hi from Japan. Oh, hello from Japan back. Hello to Japan from Ireland. There we go. Come and join me in the live chat, by the way. Joseph Tomach, man. Were you at Stendhal? Well, you must have been. You must have been right. That's amazing. Brilliant. But whenever you're writing, Joseph's a musician as well, by the way, and a very, very, very talented one. When you're writing, you need new things, and you need to keep motivated. And being in lockdown for a year and a half, and we didn't gig for nearly it was over 18 months. And then you're going, well, we're going to get out of this, and then you're looking at your political leaders, as I was saying, and I'm not confident that I'm going to ever see a gig again. And then you go, well, you have to be practical. You go, I should just move on. I need to just move on. It's time to move on. And that's kind of where you end up. And it's very sad. But as I was saying, Aaron McCann was said the same thing. And he was glad, and he says, I forgot how this felt, and you do forget, and it's only natural that you forget, and I forgot. Let me put it another way. I don't know if you forget, but you resign yourself that you may never experience it again. You resign yourself to the fact that you may never experience it again, and you just accept it. And that's kind of where I was getting to. But then we had a gig there the other week, and we had one at Stendhal, and now we have another one. So our next gig is, I'll throw the Portrush. We're playing Portrush. And we're also going to be going on Paddy Glasgow's podcast up there in Draperstown on the same day. So that's the 28th of August. If you're up the north coast or you fancy a wee drive up, please head up there and come and see us in the Atlantic in Portrush. And then, what else? Oh yeah, and I'll throw this up again. We've got the Limelight gig. Sorry, I'm just going to do something here with my camera. Give me a sec. There we go. That's far better. So we're playing the Limelight on the 2nd of December in Belfast. It's going to be a big one. And we've also got a big announcement coming as well about a tour. Yes. Hopefully, fingers crossed that will all happen and we'll be able to go ahead. And we'll be able to announce our supports for this. I think we've got them kind of sorted out. And also, Northern Ireland Music Prize. My album is nominated for the Northern Ireland Music Prize. I found out what happens. So there's all these sort of people that are a member of this committee, if you want to call it that, and they all get a vote, and that's what it is. So I got told I got a couple of votes. I don't know if that's going to be enough to get me shortlisted or longlisted. This goes to long list, and then it goes to a short list, I believe. I think that's the way it works. And then the thing, and as I said, I don't expect to win anything. Even get longlisted would be a thrill. I would love that. So if you want to hear my album, go to Bandcamp, or you can go to the Blues for the Red Sun Records, and they'll hook you up. And then there's a European distributor as well. I have a few copies here. I have a box left that I'm holding back that I'll be able to sell at gigs. So there we go. That's all my updates done, I think. Yeah. We're going to call that the updates. So let's get on with the thing. So, what's been happening? What's been happening? Well, we know what's been happening. Let me just get the thing up here. Right. This is depressing, actually. So, this past week, the USA and everyone else, because it's not just the USA that's there, the British are there, Aussies are there, Germans are there, a few others. Hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, I don't know if you've been following this story on the news. Well, you can't really not. If you've got any social media, it's all over the place. But there's been some footage, and I'm not going to play it back because it's too distressing. And the footage that kind of resonates, maybe not resonates, but horrifies me, was the footage of one of those big planes taken off from Kandahar airport. One of those big military planes. And it was in the distance. Someone was filming it on their phone. And you could see something falling to the ground. From the underside of the plane. And it turns out that the thing that was falling was people who had strapped themselves to the wheels of the underside of the plane, and they couldn't, or they were clinging to it and they couldn't hang on, and they dropped and obviously fell to their deaths from a great height, no doubt, in absolute terror. And it was kind of mindful also of the only other time most of us, I imagine, would have seen anything like that, which would have been on 9/11, because I remember watching it live on the TV as well. I'll never forget where I was. I was actually doing I was actually driving some stuff, the local dump, local recycling centre, and it came on the TV. Or sorry, came on the radio, and they went, "This is what's happening in New York right now." And I was like, "What?" And by the time I got home, then we witnessed the second plane hitting the building, and then you saw over the course of you'd see the footage and you'd see the people, and you'd realise that those things falling were people. And it's only it sort of bookends in a grim and horrific fashion this whole Afghanistan war on terror debacle. Remember, I don't know if you remember, we're talking about in the past about the use of language, the war on terror, and then that ghoul John Bolton a couple of years back was trying to, the troika of terror with Cuba and Venezuela and Iran, and trying to spin this, use this language. I mean, and this war, so-called war on terror, that is nothing to do with anything. Nothing to do with a war on terror. So the suggestion of a war on terror it implies that what we're doing is good. Yeah. And it quite clearly, there's no goodness here. And that's not to say, as with everything in online discourse, and unfortunately everything's become very polarised now. There's different reasons for that. One of the reasons that things have become so polarised is because a lot of our media are untrustworthy. We can't trust them anymore. So then it falls on the free space, which is the internet, which should remain free despite its failings, in my opinion. And it does have many failings. Sorry, I'm just going to stop that. I'm going to try and get this little video here. And despite all its failings, it should remain free. But one of the reasons that the media have become so distrusted that we can reflect upon in our modern era, and it's by no means a modern phenomenon. This has been going on since World War II. Before it, even. Let me give you an example. The Spanish flu. World War I, the Spanish flu. It's not the Spanish flu. That flu, that global pandemic, which is, funnily enough, what we're going through, another version of that right now, was actually, the first ever case of that was in an American military base. It's in somewhere like Kansas. But the reason it was called a Spanish flu was because there was a media blackout, because World War I was on at the time. Spain was a neutral country, not involved, so it was allowed to report upon the pandemic that was current at the time, current and happening. It was allowed to it was reporting on it, so therefore it got referenced as the Spanish flu. Nothing to do with Spain. So that's a small, maybe not a great example, but it is an example of how the media is used to construct narratives. In that case, poorly, and in most cases poorly, to be fair. In that case, very untruthfully. But there's much more. There's hundreds of examples over the decades, but the example that I'm thinking of specifically is the embedding, when they embedded the troops, with the invasion of Afghanistan and then the invasion of Iraq. These two countries, you've got to remember, were blamed for the 9/11 attacks, although they had nothing to do with them, right? No matter what you think, they didn't. And if you still think they did, you're wrong, they didn't. But the embedding of the media that got them access to the action, but it was a selective action. And who was doing the selecting? Obviously the military and the politicians. So then the media became stenographers. And they were, in as much as they were reporting reporting on war, they were reporting on what from one side only. And then you remember, if you don't remember this at the time, that I do, and this happened, the only one of the main media, there were a few Western journalists that were reporting going into the field and not being embedded with the troops. And what they embedded with the troops meant was that they would literally go in with the troops in their Humvees or in their helicopters or whatever, and then reporting what it meant was, but there were a few that weren't doing it. And just trying to get this video here. It's Chomsky. I have a wee Chomsky video here for you. I forgot to get it, of course, before it started, and now you have it. There we go. So what it meant was, so there was a few Western journalists that weren't going in with the troops, and they were doing great work. But there was only one major network, and that was Al Jazeera. And the response of the Western military was to literally bomb them. And you remember they attacked the Al Jazeera base? I do. I remember it very well. And so, over the course of the past 20 years, we've now... Let me just pull this, see if this comes up.
Assuming this quote unquote pull.
The big Durgate.
Assuming this quote unquote pullout happens September 11th, what do you predict for the next year or two or three?
Don't claim any expertise in this, but from all the information.
There he is. Everybody's favorite stoner. No, he's not. But anyway, so that's over the course of the past 20, and Al Jazeera got bombed, and then over the course of the past 20 years. So then we end up, you skip forward to today, and now we're in the maw of this debacle. And this is the point. What is the point? You get what I'm saying? So what's the point? That is the question. What is the point of all of this? There fucking isn't one. There never was one. Well, there is one, but it's not what we think it is. It's not to do good. It's not to save anyone. It's not to provide any poor people with this. And we're hearing these narratives now coming out through our political people that are going on about women's rights. They've been bombing these countries into ash for 20 years. They don't give a fuck about women's rights. They're going on now about LGBTQ plus rights. They've been bombing these countries into ash for 20 years. They don't give a fuck about LGBTQ plus rights. And don't allow these things to become distracting, like these embedded reporters have been doing over the past 20 years. That the tail fins of these planes now have rainbow flags and BLM logos on them. Not the point. And that is a nice little illustration, if you want to think of it that way, of the problem with class consciousness that we talk about in socialism. We need to be more it doesn't matter what colour your skin is. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter your sexual choices. These things it doesn't matter your gender. These things don't matter. What class are you? And we've got more in common with the people in that country that have been getting bombed to ash for 20 years. The soldiers, there's a picture on the screen. It's going to be from the first article that I read. That soldier on that picture, in that article, that lone soldier walking across a dust bowl with that mountain range in the back has got more in common with the people that he's going to blow up than the people that sent him there. And that's the problem. So you're saying, so then the next thing is, well, it's okay saying that now. That's all with 2020 perfect hindsight. You didn't know that at the time. Yes, I fucking did. And there were lots of us. You probably are one of them. We all knew this was bullshit. We knew at the time that this was a mistake. I remember it very clearly. I remember this was a big turning point for me. This Osama bin Laden character, we then find out who he is over the course of the next whatever period of time, going back to 18 years ago when this war started. 18 years they've been at this war. That's insane. And we find out who this guy is. This guy comes from, he was a Mujahideen fighter. Who were the Mujahideens fighting? The USSR in the 80s. And the might of the USSR couldn't defeat them. And Osama bin Laden was one of those. And they were being funded by the Yanks. Not all the way through that conflict, that war, but certainly towards the end of it. Well, a good bit of it. They were being funded. If you ever want to watch a movie about it, there's a movie with Tom Hanks called Charlie Wilson's War, I think it is. And it's about it. It's very entertaining. And it does provide you with some facts. Some key facts. Obviously written from a certain perspective. But you're an intelligent person, so you're going to be able to see through that. So, then all these Mujahideen fighters, they end up in these camps after the defeat of the USSR. A lot of these people, I'll tell you in a minute why, but they end up in these camps in North Pakistan, these madrasas, and they end up becoming radicalized, and they become the Taliban, and then eventually Al-Qaeda. The Taliban are actually, sorry, that's not true. They become Al-Qaeda. The Taliban already exist, right? So they become, these guys in these camps become Al-Qaeda. And the Osama bin Laden cat and the others like him come from there. And then they go back. And they start to a global Islamic fundamentalist jihadi thing that they do, right? So, here we go. We'll start at the beginning. Who are the Taliban? Little pocket history of what we're talking about. Oh, let me just get the correct article up. See if I can find it. There it is. Who are the Taliban? This is on the BBC website. The Taliban were removed from power in Afghanistan by the US-led forces in 2001. But the group has been on the offensive in recent months and is now on the brink of seizing power. This is right up to date. It mentions, as the US prepared to complete its withdrawal by the 11th of September, after 2 decades of war, the militants took major cities and now have reached the outskirts of the capital, Kabul. And at the point of me reading this, have taken Kabul. Although there are still American and British forces there, but they're not at each other. I read a Twitter thread earlier on that some British troops, Paras, I believe, are doing patrols and going collecting civilians that want out from, obviously British first of all, which is their priority. But I think they're taking other people too, and they're coming across these Taliban militants, the Taliban, and there's no. They're not going at it. They're just letting each other get on with it. So, the Taliban, or students in the Pashto language, emerged in the early 1990s in northern Pakistan following the withdrawal of Soviet troops from Afghanistan It is believed that the predominantly Pashtun movement first appeared in religious seminaries, mostly paid for by money from Saudi Arabia, which preached a hardline form of Sunni Islam. That's called Wahhabism, by the way. If you ever hear that word, Wahhabism. The promise made by the Taliban in the Pashtun areas straddling Pakistan and Afghanistan was to restore peace, security, and enforce their own austere version of Sharia or Islamic law once in power. So that's who they are, right? That tells you who they are, where they came from. Now, how was the connection made between the 9/11 attacks in New York? The 11 of the 15 hijackers, 11 of them were from Saudi Arabia and invading Afghanistan. What was the connection? Well, Osama bin Laden was hiding out in Afghanistan. So that's why the focus was drawn there. But as illustrated, as spoke about in this article from a publication called Council of State Media, which I follow, which is an English working socialist website that I follow on Twitter account. I have a good Twitter account. Here is an article that they published called "Some Shocking Facts About the Afghanistan War." So we know that Al-Qaeda orchestrate the attacks with Saudi money and Saudi nationals. Osama bin Laden himself is a Saudi national, but they flee to Afghanistan. They hide in Afghanistan. So that's why the attention is drawn there, right? We know that Al-Qaeda are born of the Taliban, which are born of the Mujahideen, who were funded by the CIA to fight the Soviet Union. We know these things. That's a fact. That's your connective tissue. Does that make sense? Right. So here's this article. As we are painfully aware, the US and UK invaded Afghanistan as punishment for 9/11, even though Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. Even though Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11, and we made no serious attempt to discuss peace, because peace was never the goal. America, hey, Afghanistan, we think Osama bin Laden is responsible for 9/11 and he might be hiding in your mountains. Afghanistan. Well, okay, if you could just show us the evidence of bin Laden's guilt, we'll be happy to look into that for you. America, no, we're going to bomb you instead. And they literally did. And this is what happened. The Taliban were the... Now, let me just say this. The Taliban are a bunch of medieval throat cutters, head choppers, religious fundamentalists of the worst sort. Right? But they were in control. They were the faction or regime that controls Afghanistan, that controlled Afghanistan. Right? It wasn't done democratically, Andy. Completely true, it wasn't. What's that got to do with me? What's that got to do with you? That's for the people of Afghanistan to sort out. It's not for us to do. It's not our business. The Taliban offered, apart from what I understand, they offered Osama bin Laden to the US. And they said no. We're going to bomb you instead. And here we'll go back to the article. Britain and America invaded Afghanistan just 3 weeks and 5 days after 9/11. Less than a month. They did not bother taking the time to properly investigate nor pursue diplomatic channels, let alone establish a legal basis for intervention, because the military-industrial complex wanted to invade. There was money to be made. Britain and America always help themselves to the natural resources of any country they like. And if arms manufacturers can make a pretty penny in the process, that's an added bonus. I would disagree. I would say in this instance that was the primary objective. Obviously, this is not how normal countries behave. It is how imperialists behave. And the actions were undeniably illegal under international law. And the chap quotes the UN Charter. Now, just a little bit of video here. And it's going to be the aforementioned Chomsky video. So, just read that last bit again. The military-industrial complex wanted to invade. There was money to be made. And what does Chomsky say about that?
Assuming this quote unquote pullout happens September 11th, what do you predict for the next year or two or three?
Don't claim any expertise in this, but from all the information that seems to be available, the Taliban will take over. The Afghan army will just collapse the way the Iraqi army did as soon as a couple of people started coming in pickup trucks.
Wrong video. It was meant to be this one. Sorry. So, in regards to money to be made, Julian Assange.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war. Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful.
So, I got my videos mixed up there. But you heard Julian Assange, who is currently in jail in Belmarsh prison for exposing the crimes that the US primarily, but other countries as well, have committed in Afghanistan and Iraq. So, let me just get back to the... So the Council of State media article. So it was obviously against the law. It was obviously for money. Julian Assange points out there that it was for money. He released many documents which just back that up, and we know over the years that that's what this is about. We've learnt many different things, but we're going to get to that. It's the Afghan Papers and all that sort of stuff. We've got all that coming up. But stay with me. So, it's against UN. It's against the UN Charter. He quotes the law here. The UN Charter is a treaty ratified by the United States and thus part of US law. Under the Charter, a country can use armed force against another country only in self-defense or when the Security Council approves. Neither of those conditions were met before the United States invaded Afghanistan. The Taliban did not attack us on 9/11. 19 men, 15 from Saudi Arabia, sorry I got my numbers wrong there, did. And there was no imminent threat that Afghanistan would attack the US or another UN member country. The Council did not authorise the US or any other country to use military force against Afghanistan. The US war in Afghanistan is illegal. Marjorie Cohen, Professor at Thomas Jefferson School of Law. As Marjorie Cohen stated, none of the hijackers came from Afghanistan, but what she didn't mention is the evidence that Saudi Arabia was the key suspect for 9/11. She stated that some of the 9/11 hijackers were financially supported by the Saudi Arabian government and the intelligence services. It was strongly believed Saudi Arabia was connected to Al-Qaeda. Yet we continue to call this country our friend and ally. We still continue to call this country our friend and ally, while bombing the country that had nothing to do with it. And then, one of the things that continually amazes me, that we invaded Afghanistan, and we've been there for 20 fucking years, by the way, on a complete lie, a demonstrable, transparent lie. But the connection that we made to Iraq, which have nothing to do with each other. And if you asked at the time, and I hope the average citizen on the street is a little bit more educated today, but I remember at the for years afterwards asking, you would see journalists go out and they would do the vox pops in the street and they said, we've invaded Iraq and we've overthrew Saddam Hussein and why do we do it? And they go, well, because of 9/11. And and that's the thing with the language that I was talking about. This connection, this triangle of terror, Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria or Iran or wherever, the three countries that they were trying to link together. These three countries have nothing to do with each other, other than the fact that they're Muslim. But then within Islam, the same as every other religion, you've got different facts and different sections. Sections. One is you got Sunni Muslim. Oh God, man! You've got the Wahhabi sort that the Taliban are, which are the real fucking hardliners. Oh, and the other, there's two main ones: there's Sunni and Shiite. So a country can be Sunni and a country can be Shiite, and they can be at each other's fucking throats, which is what's happened over the years in the Middle East. So, but we made this connection in the press with their embedded media and these narratives that they're able to get away with without asking journalists not asking the difficult questions for fear of losing what? Losing access. This is access journalism. They lose access to this easy source. Their editors back in the TV studios are going, oh fuck, this is great stuff in there with the soldiers talking to the boys. Yes, this looks great. That's what we want. More of that, please. That journalist asks a difficult question. They lose their access. They're not embedded anymore. They don't get to go to the press conference. They don't get the statements released that they just read out ad infinitum, like what they are, press releases. So, I digress. Afghanistan was accused of harbouring Osama bin Laden, but the US was accused of actually training him and the Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan War. Although the US insists it was simply providing foreign aid, among the CIA's accusers was former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, who later dropped dead, sending conspiracy theorists into overdrive, which is true. He resigned from the government, if you remember as well. At the time, he was in the and he crossed the, he left. That's it. Walked across the floor, joined the opposition benches. Conservative estimates put the Afghanistan death toll at 111,000 civilian casualties and 241,000 total casualties. An estimated 1.1 to 1.15 civilians were injured and 5 to 10 million driven from their homes. But you'd be relieved that 1 trillion in mineral reserves and 123 billion in oil and gas reserves were liberated in the process. This means each civilian died for roughly 10 million. If my maths is correct, says the writer of this article. The Afghanistan war cost the US taxpayer $2.4 trillion. It wasn't just the Afghans that were robbed, the Americans were robbed too. Afghanistan is the longest war in US history and created an almighty mess, destabilising the Middle East and strengthening the Taliban. And thank God that we intervene in in the Middle East. Otherwise, it might be destabilized. That's all I can say. Thank God. Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran currently under sanctions that's choking it and strangling it to death. Yemen, which is a famine, currently under famine that you never see reported anywhere. That's being caused by who? Saudi Arabia. And who's Saudi Arabia's biggest ally? Britain and the US. And there's a little little meme found today up on the screen there. If you ever feel useless, just remember the USA took 4 presidents, hundreds of thousands of lives, if not more, trillions of dollars, and 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. And do you know what? That little meme is the perfect summation of the fucking pointlessness of all of this. It really is. That just sums it up just perfectly. If you ever feel useless, just remember the USA took 4 presidents, thousands of lives, trillions of dollars, and 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. Okay, on with the article. It was so completely unnecessary and utterly illegal, making Tony Blair and George Bush Jr. war criminals who belonged behind bars for the rest of their lives. And I was commenting on Jerry Carroll's. He spoke about this, about the refugee crisis. That's inevitable. That's inevitably going to come. It's coming. It's happening now. It's live on the ground. And the rehabilitation of George W. Bush in the American media, going on to those daytime TV shows and doing a wee sort of friend dance with Ellen. The man's a fucking war criminal. He should be in jail. America invaded the wrong country while remaining allies with the guilty country. Because this was never about 9/11 and was always about money. The US president, the UK prime minister at the time, pulled off the most outrageous acts of theft and mass murder under the pretense of keeping us safe, while making the world a much more dangerous place. They were able to do this because our peoples were in a vulnerable emotional state following the horrific attacks of 9/11, and a fearful public is easier to manipulate. The attacks on the Twin Towers were utterly horrendous, but we responded by killing 36 times more innocent people in another country, and we responded to evil with an even greater evil. If you ever feel useless, just remember the USA took 4 presidents, thousands of lives, and trillions of dollars, and 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. Perfectly put. So, just on that little Chomsky video, so he was asked back in May what's going to happen, and this is what he says.
Assuming this quote unquote pullout happens September 11th, what do you predict for the next year or 2 or 3?
Don't claim any expertise in this, but from all the information that seems to be available, the Taliban will take over. The Afghan army will just collapse the way the Iraqi army did as soon as a couple of people started coming in pickup trucks and aiming guns at them. They just ran away. That's the U.S. created army. I doubt that it'll be any different in Afghanistan. Try to create an army the way we created. It's not going to be an army. So I presume they'll flee, collapse, hand over their guns, something or other. Pretty soon the Taliban will take over. It's a pretty
That's exactly what happened.
We've seen it.
Do you think that, well, that's the other thing I was going to ask. You don't think there's been any change to the Taliban? You think once they take over, it reverts back to what it was before?
Well, there are reports that there are changes. I don't know. I think you really have to be on the ground to know that.
Yeah.
You know that
And Chomsky is right, as he always is, usually 100% correct. And this is... when I'm talking earlier, a moment ago, about the Taliban are the rulers of Afghanistan. The West go into this country and think they're going to throw up a McDonald's and a Starbucks and provide all this weaponry and pump trillions of dollars into the country, and it's just going to become like the West. And they're going to do what we think in our heads is the right normal thing to do. And to us, we think democracy and capitalism, and well, not me, but that these things are normal. But these things aren't only normal to us. These things aren't normal to these countries, because if they want them, they can take them, they can do them, but they don't want them. They're not. Afghanistan, much like Iran and Iraq and the Middle East, after World War II and onward, but Afghanistan specifically is used to tribalism, Islam, communism. These are things, these are the way that they control their own societies. But we have this notion that we're going to gift them socialism or capitalism and democracy. And this is the mindset of what? The colonialist. This is the colonialist. This is the modern version of it. This is the modern version of what was done here in Ireland, what was done in Africa, what was done in South America, what was done in Australia. These people are uncivilized. They don't know. They're not as wise as us. They're not as superior as us. So we think we can go into their country and act like this. Then when they rebel, they become insurgents in their own country. We call them insurgents or terrorists. They're the terrorists. The heavily militarized biggest army that's ever been assembled, that has been shipped thousands of miles from another country, other countries, with hardware that is out of science fiction, to fight a load of shepherds with 1980s Soviet rifles. As Walter says, they can't find reverse in a Soviet tank. Walter from The Big Lebowski. But we call them the terrorists, and they're uncivilized because they don't accept our way of life. So it's all about perspective. It's all about what way do you look at this. If you look at it from the white Western imperialist perspective, we're gifting them democracy, capitalism, and Starbucks. If you look at it from their perspective, saying, I don't care what you are. I don't want you telling me what to do. And I might not want them, being the Taliban or whoever, telling me what to do. But we can deal with, and this is going to sound a bit odd. I'm not even going to make the parallel because it's too much of a parallel. It's too far. But there's a lot to be said. Whenever you're a colonialized people, you don't want the colonialists. Doesn't matter what they are. Doesn't matter if they're showering you with fucking chocolate sprinkles. You don't want them. Fuck off. And the idea that you can go and bomb some northern Pakistan or some Afghani wedding party and then act surprised whenever the sons of the victims take up arms against you, and then you call them insurgents and terrorists. You act, and our media, our embedded media, run with it. These insurgents, these Taliban, these terrorists did a roadside bomb, improvised explosive device. Without any form of context, there's a reason why that this might have happened, that happened last week, and then this happened today. Do you know? And it is literally imperialism of the worst sort. Right. So there's an article. Now I don't know if you know this. I'm going to move on to this. This is the last bit of reading that I'm going to do. But I'll play this video first. This will explain. Have you ever heard of anything called the Afghan Papers? You may not have, but it was huge. It was a story broken by the Washington Post. So here's a little video explaining what the Afghan Papers are. There was a book called the Afghanistan Papers. Here we go.
President Biden, not long after he took office, made a decision that he's going to complete the withdrawal of U.S. military troops from Afghanistan, who have been there for almost 20 years.
I will not send another generation of Americans to war in Afghanistan.
This was something that his three predecessors had all tried to do.
And by the end of next year, our war in Afghanistan will be over.
And of course, thousands of troops remained in Afghanistan and continued to fight and continued to die.
A bombshell series of investigative reports in the Washington Post
of a trove of government documents.
Officials deliberately misled the public about what exactly was going on.
My name's Craig Whitlock, and I'm an investigative reporter for the Washington Post and an author of the book, The Afghanistan Papers, A Secret History of the War. The Afghanistan Papers are a collection of documents, or interviews, most of them, with more than 400 people who played a direct role in the war. And these were interviews done by a government agency called the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan, in which they were confidentially asking people what went wrong during the war. For our book, The Afghanistan Papers, one thing we've obtained were hundreds of additional oral history interviews, government reports, and diplomatic cables. What was being told to the public was completely at odds with reality on the ground.
We have made remarkable progress.
We're not losing a war.
I'm going to stop the video. This report was done and it became a book. This guy called Craig Whitlock, and he's a journalist for the Washington Post, as you've probably gathered from watching the video. And the Washington Post did this, and they broke this story, and it was massive. And they brought the American government to court twice to get these Freedom of Information requests fulfilled. Heavily redacted, as you saw on the screen. But nonetheless, absolutely shocking stuff. But that they're capable of doing this one time. It's almost, I don't know why they do it, because they're so shit most of the rest of the time. But that this one time, it shows you that with the massive resources, by the way, the Washington Post is owned by none other than everybody's favourite fucking space asshole, Jeff Bezos. Sorry, fiddle my mic up thing again. You know that thing that I like it to be in the middle. There we go, got it. So, it's kind of depressing because they have the resources to do this. Independent media, all the independent media sources that you may follow, I would follow the likes of the Grey Zone and, you know, whatever, many others. They don't have the resources to do this, but the Washington Post does, and when they do, this is what they get. It's amazing. I just wish they would do it all the time. That's the point I'm trying to make. On with the video.
Not here by any means.
We are prevailing.
They knew the war had been unwinnable. There were literally commanding generals saying we had no strategy, not just a bad strategy, we had no strategy at all. Our initial goal in invading Afghanistan back in 2001 was very clear at the time.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes
to try and eliminate al-Qaeda and prevent a repeat of the 9/11 attacks. Al-Qaeda was pretty much gone within the first 6 months of the war. It fled Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden went to Pakistan, and then it became blurrier. Who were we fighting? Who was the enemy? Was it just Al-Qaeda? Was it the Taliban? And that's where the mission really started to go awry, was there was no real consensus on what the United States was trying to achieve.
Routing out the Taliban was important, but building a school is equally important.
From democracy to women's rights to infrastructure to education.
I think the United States got ahead of itself. It tried to accomplish too much too quickly. The dollar cost was at least $1 trillion, but Afghanistan was so poor and destitute, it couldn't possibly absorb that much money in that short a period of time. So much of the money was wasted. It went into people's pockets. It corrupted many Afghan officials. Afghan people became...
By the way, that corruption that he talks about, so the money that America was shoveling into Afghanistan, that same corruption is a direct consequence of that's led to the complete collapse of the Afghan government this week. The Taliban just ran away. Because they're not a real army, they're not a real government. They just got shoveled money, just keep this pretense up. And there's actually evidence that suggests that something like 30% of the Afghan army were Taliban.
Less and less confident in their government. Obama tried to go in with a lot more troops in hopes of persuading the Taliban to cut a peace deal with the Afghan government. The whole strategy was to train the Afghan security forces so they could defend their own country, so they could defeat the Taliban on their own. The United States was really trying to build a whole new military in its own image. We're paying for up to 350,000 Afghan soldiers and police officers. The Taliban was frankly much more motivated, much better organized, and as US military officials make clear in the Afghan papers, the Afghan security forces really didn't have any motivation to fight. More than 90% of the recruits in the Afghan army were illiterate. It was such an enormous task, it was kind of doomed to failure from the beginning.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
Since bin Laden was killed, it's harder to say what we've accomplished in Afghanistan, despite what the generals and diplomats were telling the American public all along.
Our troops will fight to win.
President Trump was going to try and persuade the Taliban to negotiate a peace deal.
We are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists.
And the way he was going to try and get the Taliban to the bargaining table was, for lack of a better description, he was going to try and bomb the hell out of them. The number of airstrikes became higher under Trump than it even did under Obama when we had this surge of 100,000 troops. And in some respects, that worked. The Taliban did come to the negotiating table.
When I came to office, I inherited a diplomatic agreement duly negotiated between the government of the United States and the Taliban that all U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan. It's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home.
I think the tone coming out of President Biden is different from what we've heard in the past. Before, we always heard that we were going to win.
Mr. President, if this isn't a mission accomplished moment, what is it in your view?
No, there's no mission accomplished.
How would you describe it?
The mission was accomplished in that we got Osama bin Laden, and terrorism is not emanating from that part of the world.
The human cost is so staggering. More than 2,300 U.S. troops were killed in Afghanistan. Tens of thousands more were wounded and came back. This doesn't even include the much bigger costs borne by the Afghan people. Well over 100,000 Afghans have also died in the war. This is a country that's been at war or in conflict for more than 40 years. And the United States spent all this money and spent more lives trying to fix it, but it really didn't accomplish a whole lot on that front.
So that's Craig Whitlock, the author of the book, The Afghanistan Papers. So, as I said, and you've probably gathered from that little video, it was through he was indefatigable. He was tenacious, and he did a great job of journalism. But it's been reported, but unless you're on top of it, unless you kind of paying attention to these things, there's a good chance you've never have heard of the Afghanistan Papers. But there's an article here that I've pulled up. I'm not going to read it because it's a bit long, and I'm kind of going over my time. It's an article from The Intercept, but I'll read just a little paragraph, little sort of excerpts from it. So, and it's talking about the Afghan Papers. So, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, Americans were braying for war. 90% of Americans approved of the United States attacking Afghanistan. 65% of the public was comfortable with the prospect of Afghan civilians being killed. Only 23% thought the war would last more than 2 years. Americans wanted blood, and they got it. I remember saying at the fucking time, whoever did this is fucked. It was so obvious. America was like, the tag. You've got the tiger by the tail if you're doing that. But the response was, indiscriminate at best. But I won't read the whole article. Like I said, it references the book, it references the papers. But here are some excerpts from the papers. Army Lieutenant General Douglas Lute, who was the White House war czar under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, he said, "We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking." Richard Boucher, the Bush administration's top diplomat for South and Central Asia, "We did not know what we were doing." Lieutenant General David Barno, Afghanistan war commander, "There was a tremendous dysfunctionality in unity of command inside of Afghanistan, inside the military." And Army General Dan McNeil, "There was no campaign plan. I tried to get someone to define for me what winning meant, even before I went over, and nobody could." And there were hundreds of other officials, military officers, diplomats, and analysts that could have levelled with the American people immediately, or at any time in the last 20 years, and had they done so, perhaps the war in Afghanistan could have been shortened by a decade or more, which still would have meant the war was on for 10 years. World War II only lasted 6, so that's still longer than World War II. It's an awful long time. Perhaps following conflicts wouldn't have been so easy to start, or proved so difficult to end. So that article goes on. It's quite a long one, and I would have needed to have started reading it about half an hour ago. But I'll link to it. I'll put a link to it in the description. So there we go. Afghanistan, a fucking shit show. And we're out of it. We're out of it. I was never in it. You were never in it, most likely. And by the way, please understand that I'm not criticising, or although I do know people that have served in the armies of the world and served in places like that, and I'm not criticising them specifically or directly, or this is, as I said, that guy, I showed you that photograph of that soldier walking across that plane in Afghanistan. I believe truly that man has more in common with the people that he's been sent to kill than he has with the people that sent him there. And this is military-industrial complex shit. American military budgets of $700 billion a year. That money needs spent, and it's going to get spent. And don't think for one second that if the US and the UK are leaving Afghanistan, they're going somewhere else. That money needs spent. SME 30. A mate of mine on the live chat here, someone said, a mate of mine served out there and is now wondering what the fuck it was all about. That's what I'm reading, by the way. I'm reading exactly that on Twitter and on the social media that I'm picking up. I'm not having to go with the working class men and women that went and did their duty as they seen it. What was the point of this? There's this little meme. If you ever feel useless, just remember the USA took 4 presidents, thousands of lives, trillions of dollars in 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. So cui bono, the old Roman, the old Latin saying, cui bono, who benefits? Who benefits? The working class soldier. They don't benefit. They've maybe had to go and do things that they never imagined in their whole lives they would have to do despite the training that they got. They maybe come home wounded mentally and physically. Maybe both. Certainly the thousands and thousands of Afghanis that have been killed. Innocents who are called insurgents and terrorists because they died in the bomb. So the missile lands, everyone that go 20 people dead, they're all terrorists. Well, that's not how that works. They weren't all terrorists. There might have been there might have been a terrorist there. There might have been someone that they labelled as a terrorist or an insurgent or a rebel or whatever it is, the word that they have chosen to use. That doesn't mean that they all were. And as I said, I'm not having a go. I reiterate this point. Not having a go at the working class soldier that ended up going out there for whatever reason. So, going to finish, as you know, I like to finish each of these episodes with a little bit of culture. So the Afghan thing is fucked. I've no answers for you. I would like to be able to say this is and that is and because of, and I don't fucking know. I know it's fucked. I know that. I just hope that we don't do any more of this. It's terrible. So here we go. Here, I'm going to finish on this article. Now, I found this on Twitter, and this is fantastic. And you can see up on the screen there, 500 years of Drury's Irish, celebrating 500 years of Albrecht Drury's watercolour drawings of Irish soldiers and peasants. I've never heard of these until this week. Apparently these are a big deal. Shows you. So you can see them here. They're in. They're going to be on a display. So this Albert Drury, who was a Renaissance artist, did these drawings of Irish peasants and soldiers. Came through Ireland, did these drawings of Irish peasants and soldiers 500 years ago. So, and there it is. You can see it on the screen. I've got it up on the screen for you. So I'll read the little thing. I'll need to get behind it here to see it. So 500 years of Albrecht Drury's Irish soldiers and peasants. In 1521, the German Renaissance master Albrecht Dürer composed a drawing. Now it gets class. I'm going to just bear with me here. This gets class. See these dudes here? Where are these two guys here? Just right there. With their fancy floppy haircuts. What do you hear about them? They're fucking brilliant. So, drawing of a group of 5 Irish soldiers, 2 barefoot peasants in their characteristic dress and arms and armour. Sorry, I've got the cables from the camera are getting them away. Drury's soldiers represent the Gallowglass and Cairn infantrymen who made up the bulk of Irish military forces. These mercenaries entered the employment of Irish lords and clan leaders from whom they received wages, livery, food and lodgings. The name Gallowglass meant a foreign warrior from the Hebrides. Many were descendants from Scots Norse families who had come to acquire states in Ireland. Gallowglass were highly trained elite warriors who carried heavy weaponry such as broadswords and long shafted axes. Cairns were everyday soldiers who typically wielded missile weapons such as darts, spears, slings, bows, arrows, as well as swords, daggers and axes, and they excelled in ambush attacks. So the Gallowglass and Cairn infantrymen. Now wait till you see this. I'll just skip this on to the next bit. So there on the screen you can see Durer composed is drawn in 1521, most likely upon his return to Nuremberg after a trip to the Netherlands. On this trip, the artist had witnessed and collected foreign dressed weapons and accessories, piquing his interest in other cultures. And there's a translation on the top. It says, "Thus go the soldiers in Ireland on the far side of England, and thus go the peasants in Ireland." Right? Durer orientates Ireland to the west of England, highlighting the country's enduring relationship with its neighbour. The English crown maintained a foothold around Dublin known as the Pale. I'm sure you've heard of that, the Pale. While Anglo-Norman lords had ruled large pockets of the island following the Norman invasion of Ireland in the 1100s. So this is my favourite bit. And you can't see it there, so I'll just open that up. Oh, Jesus, not even want to show you it. Let me see. There it is. Right, so this is my favourite bit. Mantles with a quintessential overgear. Oh, there it is. A hairstyle known as the Glib was popular among 16th century Irishmen, characterised by a long fringe or mop of hair that fell upon the front and sides of the face. It was particularly reviled by Tudor colonialists and aggressors in Ireland for its supposed ability to conceal the identity of the wearer. And if you look at it, it looks like a trendy haircut from today. You see people with that exact same so it's all sort of short and cropped at the back and all floppy and fringy at the front. And obviously they can then, it drops over their eyes and they can conceal their identity. They just tip their head down and it conceals their identity. Isn't it brilliant? I think, I love that shit. So you can see these dudes are awesome looking. So mantles were worn, the quintessential overgarment of the 16th century Ireland, worn by men and women to protect from the cold and the rain, typically made from sheep's wool. So mantle, this is a big sort of a blankety thing. They often featured fleecy trims. This mantle's shaggy trim is complemented by an orange and black checkered border, which you can see on the... It is not for no reason that the woolly mantle looks like a snug blanket. Mantles were said to double up as bedding for transient soldiers and travellers. English colonialist Edmund Spencer accused them of providing appropriate shelter for a thief or rebel. So you can see there in the picture, the dude in the picture, that's a big old blankety thing, and it's covered him right from his head right all the way around him, swords popping out there and all the way to the ground, and fuck knows what he's hiding under that blanket. He looks deadly, and if he's half as armed as the boys around him, under the blanket he's armed to the fucking teeth. Irish shirts, linne, that's an Irish word by the way, linne, or for what I'm wearing is a tail linne t-shirt. In this period were ample in volume, had wide hanging sleeves, and were often dyed yellow with the use of saffron. Saffron had been imported into Ireland since early medieval times from the Middle East, Spain, and the Essex town of Saffron Weldon. There you go. Didn't know that that's where it got its name from. Derived from the dried stigmas of saffron on crocus flowers, the dye produced a rich golden yellow tone, and its popularity in Ireland demonstrates the robust trading network linking Irish ports to commodities sourced from abroad. So you can you can read it. If they dyed their shirts using saffron, you can extrapolate other facts from that. So here's the soldiers. These guys with a gallows glass. This soldier wears a form of light armour quilted into vertical rolls. They were sleeved and fitted at the waist. The Irish cotton derived from the Highland Acton, probably pronounced that wrong, many examples of which can be viewed in West Highland effigy sculpture. There it is. Isn't that fucking fantastic? So I'll just take that away and I'll move that back more into the middle of the screen. Can you see it there? How fucking brilliant is that? So there they are. So you can see the guy here on the right, the far right, he's the one wearing the saffron dyed ligne or shirt, barefoot, which indicates his peasant status, although he is a soldier. And then the guy with the blankety, geez, I forgot what it was called. Let me get what that was called again. I want to get what that was called, that big blanket. Mantle, woolly mantle. Yeah. So, and you can see there the sword. Oh, look at the size of it. It's going from that would go from the tip of his nose to his foot. That's a big sword. It's huge. And the other guys are everyone's weaponed up. Look at the sword. Look at the size of the fucking thing. They were for taking down horses. Those big and in Scotland they were called claymores, weren't they? They were huge and they would take down charging horses with those. Fuck, you'd have to be some bay to wield that. But there we go. That's our wee bit of culture for the day. Although it's a wee bit bloody, but it's kind of in keeping with the theme, I think. Is it? You know, with Afghanistan and stuff. Normally, you know what I'm like. I'm such a fucking fanny. I would try and sort of make it all a wee bit nice and light, so that way, because of the gruesome aspect and nature of the rest of the podcast. But I think this is probably better. I love that picture. I just love that picture. If you're listening to this on the podcast, this is Albrecht Dürer, 500-year-old drawing of Ireland. I'm sure if you Google it, the easiest way, if you'd obviously have a look at it, is to come on to the YouTube and have a look for the video. And why don't you do that? Like, share, subscribe, everybody, and we'll call this thing done. And we're gonna have that for the closing thing. I'm sure we'll see you next week. We'll talk to you next week. Stay well. And look after each other. Bye.